So, if you were reading the news back in July 2026, you probably saw governments and development funds announcing like well over $100 million in fresh capital.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All this money dedicated to climate and nature restoration. And if you just scan those headlines, you see these huge numbers and you think, great, the cavalry has arrived. We're saved.
Yeah, it looks fantastic on paper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the problem is, if you actually know how to read the fine print of these financial announcements, you realize pretty quickly that a massive chunk of that money doesn't legally exist yet.
Right, or at the very least, it's nowhere near ready to actually be deployed into the real world.
Yeah. And that's what we're getting into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to completely change how you read and analyze environmental investment news.
Which is so important because, honestly, the current way we talk about it creates a massive distortion.
Oh, for sure. So we are looking at a stack of sources from a July 2026 climate nature briefing. And it covers 5 distinct financial announcements.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of just giving you a list of money, we want to show you that these announcements actually represent a highly sequential chain.
Yay, a chain of events.
Yeah, a chain that runs all the way from preparing a project to structuring the legal frameworks, layering the risk, and finally going all the way down to verifying the actual ecological results on the ground. Okay, let's unpack this.
I love that framing because treating all these announcements as just one big monolithic class of new capital is a dangerous mistake. It completely obscures the mechanics of how environmental finance actually gets executed.
It just lumps it all into a giant, confusing pile of money.
Exactly. The true understanding comes from spotting the patterns. That sequential chain is everything. The key for anyone operating in this space is recognizing exactly which link is being built in any given announcement.
So you have to be able to look at a headline and basically ask, who holds the link that comes next?
Yes, who holds the link that comes next? Because if that next link isn't there, the capital just stops moving. It sits there.
Right. So let's start right at the beginning of the chain with the foundational link, which is making a project investable.
A groundwork.
Exactly. So we have an announcement from the Asian Development Bank and the government of Japan. They are establishing the Water Initiative for Security, Efficiency, and Resilience Fund, based in Tokyo.
Right, the Wiser Fund.
Yeah, the Wiser Fund. And it's seeded with an initial $10 million from Japan. Now, I look at this and I see $10 million that, isn't actually buying any solar panels or planting any mangroves.
No, it's entirely focused on project preparation.
Right. So if the goal of climate finance is to fund real solutions, I've got to ask, why are we celebrating a $10 million fund that doesn't actually invest in projects? I mean, for a lot of people, this just looks like bureaucratic overhead.
I get that. It can certainly look that way from the outside, but project preparation is the absolute prerequisite for institutional capital to flow.
Okay, so it's like prepping a canvas before painting. You can't just start throwing paint at a wall.
That's a great way to put it. You can't build a house without pouring the foundation first, especially in emerging markets and ASEAN states. A trust fund of this specific design isn't meant to procure hardware at all.
So what does it actually buy then?
Its explicit job is to fund policy reform, technical training, knowledge sharing, and local water governance across the bank's developing member countries.
Okay, so it's essentially the R&D and regulatory compliance phase.
Yes, exactly.
It honestly reminds me of a tech startup that has to spend its entire seed round just securing patents and navigating regulatory hurdles before they can even, write a single line of code.
That is a very accurate analogy because if a government in Southeast Asia wants to overhaul its municipal water infrastructure,
Private capital isn't just going to blindly hand them money.
no, private capital won't touch the project if the local utility policies are disjointed or, if the municipal engineers lack the technical training to actually maintain the system long term.
Right, that's just too much risk.
Exactly. So the ADB Japan Fund is doing the highly unglamorous but absolutely essential groundwork. It de-risks the environment before the big money ever arrives.
Makes sense. But what really stands out in the briefing notes for this one is that the nature relevance of this specific fund is listed as purely prospective.
Yeah, that's a crucial detail. The announcement doesn't explicitly mandate nature-based solutions or biodiversity quotas.
So it might not even help nature directly.
Well, whether this water fund actually benefits nature depends entirely on how those future projects are designed by the member states. But for new climate investors, this is lesson 1.
Which is?
Without this preparation link, nothing happens. The pipeline of bankable projects simply doesn't exist without it.
Got it. So Japan and the ADB are doing the heavy lifting to prep the ground, but having a blueprint for a bankable project doesn't mean you actually have a bank account to put the money in, right?
Exactly. You need a vehicle.
So this is where we transition from project prep to the institutional framework. And from what I've seen, this is often where governments rush to announce massive platforms just to capture headlines.
Oh, all the time.
Which brings us to Mexico. Mexico's Environment Ministry, along with their Finance Ministry and the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, proposed an environmental capital fund.
Right. And this is a perfect case study in the difference between political intention and structural design.
Yeah, because they announced an initial mobilization target of up to $10 million for ecosystem restoration, natural capital protection, all that good stuff.
It sounds great.
It sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, if a government announces a $10 million target for nature, isn't that automatically a win?
But so what does this all actually mean? Because when you parse the joint communique, there are massive structural holes.
There are. And for a financial professional, spotting those missing pieces in the framework is a critical skill.
So what's missing? Well, when you read the Mexico announcement, the first thing you notice is that it does not name a fund administrator.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It does not establish a clear fiduciary mandate. And it provides zero definition of what actually constitutes an eligible expenditure.
Wait, really? So they just announced a number? I would actually argue that announcing a financial target without an administrator isn't just like an incomplete link in the chain. It creates a false sense of security.
How so?
Because it allows everyone to applaud the $10 million target while completely ignoring the fact that nobody is officially legally in charge of the money yet.
Yes. That is exactly the friction point between political signaling and financial reality. A mobilization figure announced before an administrator is even named is just an idea waiting for a legal framework.
It's just a press release.
Exactly. You cannot execute a fund, you cannot sign contracts or actually deploy capital without an entity holding the fiduciary responsibility to manage that money according to strict, legally binding rules.
So it really teaches you to immediately look past the dollar amount.
You have to.
The real discipline for professionals here is looking to see if the administrator, the mandate, and the eligible expenditures are named in the exact same breath as the financial target.
Precisely. Because without those three structural pillars, it is practically impossible for institutional investors to engage. They have no counterparty to underwrite.
Okay, so let's say the platform is fully built, the administrator is named, the fiduciary rules are locked in. The next step is actually getting the capital into the structure.
Right, filling the bucket.
But the money doesn't just get dumped into one giant checking account, right? It gets layered based on risk, which brings us to the capital stack.
Yes, the capital stack. This is where the mechanics of risk and reward really define how climate finance operates.
It's all about who takes the hit if things go wrong.
Exactly.
So I want to look at Acumen's Second Resilient Agriculture Fund and the AGRI3 fund because they really brilliantly illustrate how different types of capital behave. Let's look at the risk takers first. Acumen reported $90 million in commitments for their Resilient Agriculture Fund. And specifically, the Green Climate Fund and FASA, which is the Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation Initiative, took what is called the first loss position.
Right, first loss.
Now, I tend to think of first loss capital like a massive commercial insurance deductible or like the crumple zone of a car.
The crumple zone, I like that.
Yeah, it takes the hit so the rest of the passengers are safe. If a storm wipes out the agricultural projects, the Green Climate Fund and FASA pay out that deductible first, shielding the other investors from the initial financial blow.
The insurance deductible or crumple zone is a highly effective way to understand it. First loss capital is heavily subordinated.
Meaning it's at the bottom of the payout list.
Exactly. It is usually provided by public entities, development banks, or philanthropic donors who prioritize impact over immediate financial return.
So they expect to lose some money.
They are intentionally stepping into the line of fire to provide a safety net. And they do this because that safety net fundamentally alters the risk profile for everyone else.
It catalyzes action.
Right. It makes hesitant private investors feel secure enough to actually jump in and participate.
So they absorb the scariest part of the risk equation. But then on the flip side of that, we have the SDG Impact Finance Initiative, which is a Swiss public-private partnership.
Yes.
The briefing notes they committed $2.4 million in senior capital to the AGRI3 fund. Now, senior capital is the reinforced cabin of the car, right? It's at the very top of the stack. It's the safest money. It gets paid back first.
Correct.
So if first loss capital is catalytic because it absorbs risk, how can senior capital, which actively avoids risk, also be considered a catalyst for a fund?
What's fascinating here is that catalytic effects in finance can come from opposite ends of the capital stack, just through entirely different mechanisms.
Oh, really? How does that work?
Well, while first loss catalyzes by providing a safety net, senior capital catalyzes by providing market validation.
Like a stamp of approval.
Precisely. When an institution like the SDG Impact Finance Initiative places a stable senior layer of capital into a fund like AGRI3, they are signaling massive stability to the broader market.
They're saying, we looked at the books, and it's good.
Exactly. They are effectively telling other institutional players, we have thoroughly vetted this fund's underwriting standards, their management team, and their pipeline, and we are comfortable being the foundation of their return structure.
Ah, so it brings in the cautious money.
Yes, that creditworthiness attracts more conservative institutional capital that might not have the mandate to take on mezzanine or equity-level risk.
It's so fascinating because if you just read a headline that says, millions invested in the
Yeah.
AGRA3, and you mentally collapse those risk layers together, you completely lose the nuance of how the machine actually works.
You do.
You hide the specific risk that each partner accepted to make the deal function.
And speaking of losing nuance in the headlines, the briefing highlights some specific financial terminology in that acumen announcement that professionals need to be very, very precise about.
Oh, right, the committed versus closed thing.
Yes. So Acumen reported $90 million in committed capital against a $120 million target. But FMO, the Dutch Entrepreneurial Development Bank, who is one of the key investors, reported the fund reaching a legal first close at $64.5 million.
See, I can see a retail investor looking at that and thinking someone is publishing bad data. Like, are they disagreeing on how much money is actually in the fund? Which number is real?
They aren't disagreeing at all. They're just measuring two entirely different stages of the financial chain.
Okay, break that down for me.
So the $90 million figure measures aggregate commitments. These are legally binding promises, sure, but the capital hasn't all been drawn down or officially admitted into the fund's operational structure yet.
So it's basically the total pledged over the lifetime of the fund. Like,
Yeah.
we promised to give you this eventually.
Yes, exactly. A legal first close, on the other hand, means that $64.5 million has been formally admitted. The ink is dry, the specific capital calls have been made, and that money is officially sitting in the structure, ready to be deployed today.
So using the terms interchangeably is a big mistake.
A huge mistake. Quoting aggregate commitments as if they are legally admitted, deployable funds implies a false precision that can really distort market analysis. As a practitioner, you can only deploy what has legally closed.
Which bridges us perfectly to the deployment phase. Because the money is stacked, the risk is managed, the legal closes have finally occurred. Now, the capital hits the dirt.
Right, it enters the real world.
So the briefing highlights the Rockefeller Foundation committing $4 million of mission-aligned capital to Alder Point Capital Management. And what's crucial here is the mandate, right? This is for investment into U.S. farmland and timberland.
Yes. It's moving beyond frameworks and into tangible physical assets. And the specific use of mission-aligned capital in timberland and farmland is highly strategic here.
Right, because if you are trying to transition, say, conventional agriculture or standard timber operations into regenerative, sustainable practices, the return horizon gets really stretched out.
It takes time. Nature takes time.
Exactly. Standard private equity might demand aggressive short-term extraction to get their returns. But mission-aligned capital buys the operational time needed for the ecosystem to actually regenerate while still targeting a financial return eventually.
It's patient capital, deployed for a very specific physical transition. And it's the ultimate test of all the prior links we just talked about.
But deployment naturally raises the next critical question, doesn't it? Once the money is actually in the ground, how do you verify that the environmental impact is actually occurring?
Yes, this is the transition from financial mechanics to ecological reality.
And this is where the AGRI3 fund announcement gets incredibly compelling to me. Because the SDG Impact Finance Initiative didn't just hand over their $2.4 million in senior capital and, walk away.
No, they certainly did not.
As a strict, non-negotiable condition of their investment, AGRI3 had to undergo an independent assessment by a group called Bluemark.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up scoring a platinum rating for their impact management practice. Now, here's where it gets really interesting to me. The rarest thing in this entire briefing wasn't the millions of dollars. It was the discipline of making an external, independent ecological check a strict condition of entry.
I agree completely. That requirement is perhaps the most vital signal in the entire landscape of climate finance right now.
Really? Why so critical?
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Sure.
you can see why this level of discipline is so necessary. There's a massive global push right now for corporate accountability regarding nature.
Oh, like all the new reporting standards?
Exactly. For instance, the International Sustainability Standards Board, the ISSB, is targeting October 2026 for an exposure draft on nature-related disclosures.
Which sounds incredibly authoritative,
Yeah.
International Sustainability Standards Board.
It sounds authoritative, but you have to understand the specific mechanism of what the ISSB actually does. Their draft is an IFRS Practice Statement International Financial Reporting Standards.
Okay, so it's a reporting standard.
Right. It is non-mandatory guidance on how to report material nature information. It is fundamentally just a framework for how a corporation should fill out the paperwork describing what they believe their impact on nature is.
Ah, I see. So the IFRS and ISSB are basically just providing the template for corporate self-reporting.
Yes.
It's the difference between like me filling out a questionnaire saying I eat healthy and exercise every day versus a doctor actually drawing my blood and checking my vital signs to verify my health.
That is exactly the dynamic. Reporting your intentions or your internal models is vastly different from an independent third party like Bluemark conducting a rigorous evidence-based audit to verify that an ecological result actually occurred on the ground.
Because self-reporting is inherently biased, right? Even with the best intentions, you're going to grade your own homework favorably.
Absolutely. The distance between financial reporting and independent ecological testing is where the financing chain still breaks most often. That is why the Blue Mark Platinum rating tied to the SDG impact investment is the precedent worth paying attention to.
So the test has to be attached to the money.
Capital that arrives with an independent third-party verification test attached is the only version of this financing that guarantees the chain remains unbroken all the way to the ecosystem.
Which brings us to the final challenge in our chain. Because what happens when a fund demands that every single one of these links, the prep, the framework, the complex capital stacking, and the rigorous verification, be forged perfectly all at once in one of the most volatile environments on Earth?
Well, you get the Blue Action Fund's call for proposals in Asia.
Yeah. This announcement fascinated me. It's a call closing in October 2026, focusing heavily on mangroves, blue carbon markets, and the 30 by 30 conservation goal.
Which, for context for those listening, is the global initiative to legally protect 30% of the Earth's land and oceans by the year 2030.
Right. So they are offering grants of 2 to 4 million euros for work in Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, and India. But their rules are uncompromising.
Oh, incredibly strict.
Applicants have to pair area-based conservation with a highly credible pathway to carbon credit generation. And they explicitly exclude any projects that are designed primarily to offset continued fossil fuel use. No greenwashing allowed.
This is a prime example of a funder writing the integrity rules into the legal framework before a single euro is ever dispersed.
But practically speaking, I just keep thinking, how do local NGOs in Southeast Asia actually navigate these requirements? The operational burden just seems immense.
It is immense. To even apply for this capital, an NGO in Vietnam or Indonesia has to effectively pre-finance their own feasibility studies.
Which isn't cheap.
No, not at all. They have to map complex local land tenure rights with indigenous communities. They have to establish highly technical ecological baselines for carbon sequestration and prove they have a buyer for those credits who isn't just using them to offset fossil fuel emissions.
So they have to build the whole chain themselves before they even ask for the money.
Exactly. Historically, a lot of the peatland and mangrove work in this region has lacked this rigorous financial and structural discipline. The Blue Action Fund is forcing these practitioners to build a pristine chain from day one.
Okay, I want to push back on this, though, because we are ultimately talking about nature here. And nature does not care about our pristine legal frameworks.
It's very true.
You can hire the best lawyers to build the perfect fiduciary mandate. You can have the cleverest first loss capital stack absorbing the financial risk, like a giant crumple zone. You can hire Bluemark to verify everything. But how do you underwrite the risk of a restored mangrove forest simply being wiped off the map by a Category 5 cyclone in the Bay of Bengal?
This raises an important question, and it's the exact question that keeps climate financiers awake at night.
I bet.
What you are describing is the challenge of permanence.
Because you can't guarantee it.
No, you cannot. Permanence remains the ultimate unsolved challenge, specifically for blue carbon financing structures like mangrove restoration. You are dealing with coastal ecosystems that are uniquely, physically vulnerable to the very climate volatility that the financial structure is trying to mitigate in the first place.
Man, the feedback loop there is brutal.
It really is. No capital structure, no matter how brilliantly layered with senior debt and subordinated equity buffers, can physically guarantee that a biological asset will survive extreme weather.
You can't outstructure a hurricane.
Exactly. Financial risk can be mitigated and transferred among institutional players, but the ecological risk of impermanence is a variable that capital alone simply cannot secure. It requires constant, ongoing physical stewardship.
It is a profound reality check right at the very end of the day. You can engineer the money flawlessly, but the Earth still has the final say.
Oh.
So if you are listening to this, you hopefully now have a fundamentally different way to process this market. The next time you see a massive climate finance headline cross your desk, you aren't just going to see a blinding dollar amount.
Right, you're going to look for the sequential chain.
Exactly. You'll check if the project preparation has been funded. You'll look at the government framework and demand to see an actual administrator and a fiduciary mandate. You'll parse the capital stack to see who is taking the first loss deductible and who is providing the senior market validation.
And you will demand external deployment verification while constantly questioning the long-term ecological permanence of the asset itself.
You will immediately spot the missing links, which completely changes your ability to analyze risk and opportunity in this sector.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as this market matures.
Lay it on us.
We spent time discussing the wide gap between corporate financial reporting, like those upcoming ISSB and IFRS standards, and actual rigorous ecological verification.
Right. The self-reporting versus the blood test.
Yeah. Exactly. So if that gap remains as wide as it is today, are we heading toward a near future where the market requires the creation of a massive, entirely new global industry of nature auditors?
Whoa, nature auditors.
Yeah, think about it. We are talking about a highly technical workforce whose sole mandate is to wade through coastal mudflats, hike through timberlands, and physically measure biodiversity, just to mathematically prove to institutional markets that these complex capital stacks actually bought the ecological outcomes they promise.
That is wild. A completely new independent industry just to audit the physical receipts of nature. That is a massive operational shift to think about.
It's where we have to go if we want the chain to hold.
Truly fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you see a giant pile of capital announced in the news, remember to look for the chain. We'll catch you next time.